Is to disappoint. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. News just came in. There was an attack by a drone. Guess where? On the Kremlin. The Russians are talking about an attack directly on President Putin. This they have mentioned as an assassination attempt. What's happening in this war? Has Ukraine completely lost his mind? Or if there's something else? Or another question that is actually coming up is Ukraine being told attack or surrender? And is there a rift within the Defense Department of the USA? A lot of information today we will discuss with Major General Prabdeep Singh. Sir, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Adi. It's always a pleasure to be on the show. Ukraine, as you said, never fails to amuse us with new things which are happening. Latest being, of course, the claimed assassination bid on Putin through the two drones which went through. So it just shows as to how vulnerable Russia is also while the entire war is going on. So this shows the vulnerability of Moscow. It also shows the vulnerability of their, EW systems and the air defense systems. So, a cause of concern for Russia and a great kind of achievement, I would say, as far as Ukraine is concerned. So, it's full of surprises. The war is actually coming into a very interesting phase. While the world is losing interest, if I may just put it bluntly, that Ukraine today does not draw that much of attention as it did earlier. Perhaps it is because of the weariness which is setting in Europe as well as in the US, and the so-called counter-offensive which everybody is awaiting. Nobody knows where it's going to come, when it's going to come, whether it will come or not, whether it will happen or not. But then the whole thing is revolving around this counter-offensive. I have some interesting takes we shall discuss on these
Absolutely.
takes as we go along. But at the moment, the situation, of course, is that the Bakhmut, of course, continues to hold on uh, to some extent. They say about 80% or 85% of it is already in the hands of the Russians, and the only one road leading out from the western side, that is the one which has been left open. Uh, as I see it, it's a matter of time that all the Ukrainian soldiers who are there in Bakhmut will get encircled. I mean, the fight is, of course, going on. They're fighting very well, but the way they have been surrounded from all three sides, from the north, from the east, and from the south, and most of the west, I gather that they will not only they'll have to surrender, or maybe some of them will get captured. So that is the kind of situation which is happening in Bakhmut, and of course the fighting goes on in Avdiivka and the rest of the places. These are small skirmishes which are taking place, and when they loosely use the term called counter-offensive, these are not counter-offensive; these are counter-attacks
Hmm.
in military parlance. Offensive is a bigger term. These are local counter-attacks which take place, which any element which is in the defenses tries to thwart an attack and launches a counter-attack, and that's called a local counter-attack.
Tactical
So,
levels. Hmm.
yeah, at the tactical level, these are not deliberate counter-attacks. And counter-offensive is a bigger term, much bigger term. So here you find most of them are local counterattacks, and some of them have been successful. And as they would be in any battle, uh, local counterattacks would be carried out, and some may be successful. So that's what is happening around that area. And as far as the preparations for the counteroffensive is concerned, NATO has claimed that about 98%, in mark my words, 98%, whatever equipment and all that had to be given, wherewithal had to be given to Ukraine, has been provided. So that's the claim of NATO. So if the wherewithal is there, uh, I somehow I'm a little skeptical because I haven't seen this wherewithal.
Hmm.
It's a huge number of equipment which has been supplied to the Ukrainians. Where is it concentrated? By now, it should have been picked up. And some areas where these equipment have been deployed, that is what perhaps the Russians are targeting. They would be in the depth as of today because the mud is still not, the
Pretty
ground
bad.
is still not favorable as far as launching any kind of an offensive is concerned. Offensive involves a large number of tanks, armored fighting vehicles, infantry combat vehicles. They have the engineer element and the artillery, this self-propelled artillery and the air defense. Everything has to move. So there's a lot of movement which gets involved, and it cannot happen, which cannot take place on this kind of a muddy soil. So I found a very interesting term. Uh, vehicles which go over this kind of territory in Russian stroke Ukrainian, it's called Bezdurishia, means roadless vehicles. So they're the ones which are getting stuck in number of places. Uh, if you recollect, 2 or 3 days back, one of the logistics hub at Pavlograd that was
It
struck. Yeah, and that no,
big,
I mean just
huge one.
uh, yeah. I just want to clarify a few things for some of my friends who will be watching and not familiar with how the military works. Uh, you know, what are the strategic targets? There are strategic targets, and then there are tactical targets. When you're looking at the strategic level, uh, what constitutes strategic levels? Strategic levels are airfields in the depth, not the tactical airfields which are in the forward tier. These are airfields in the depth where the aircraft would generally be uh, and not having moved forward. So these strategic airfields, then you would have these strategic railroad hubs,
Hmm.
the railway lines, the railway
Supply
stations,
chains. So,
yes, where the logistics would be unloaded or would be loaded. If tanks have to move from one place to the other, they have to be loaded at some railway station, and that would be in the rear. So if it is in the rear, it becomes a strategic one. Where, say at Kiev, large number of concentration of tanks is there, and they have to move to different areas. So obviously, that is a strategic railhead. Similarly, you have these logistic installations, oil reserves.
hmm.
Wherever these oil tanks are, these are all strategic reserves or strategic targets because oil is required. If you got to run the tank, you need oil, right? You need diesel, you need engine oil, you need all kinds of lubricants. So these must get supplied in the war. All your vehicles have to move. So the diesel must be provided. So there is a whole setup which takes place. So initial before you go into battle or before you have the contact phase, you address all these areas. It also includes the command centers. It also
Hmm.
includes the places of significance like the presidential palace. So if Kremlin has been attacked, that means it's a strategic target, right?
Decision
So
making.
all
Hmm.
these things are addressed from the rear, coming forward up to there'll be certain strategic bridges which are very important and very crucial for crossing of vehicles and tanks, etc., and logistics across the river. So those are also included in strategic targets. So these will be taken on as the war develops. So today the war is already on. But in a bid to thwart the counteroffensive, Russia obviously is targeting all such areas. So you had the logistic hub, uh, being targeted. You had Kiev being bombed, being targeted with missiles. You had the NATO command center, if you recollect, last month, that was taken down. So all these things will happen. Now, similarly, uh, the Ukrainians, in a bid for a counteroffensive, God knows where it's going to come, but they started targeting Moscow. They started targeting Bryansk, that is in Russian territory. The point remains that now the war is spilling over into Russian territory as well. As of today, the war was within Ukraine or in Russian occupied areas of Ukraine. But the last uh, 1 week or couple of days, the last 3, 4 days, we have seen that the war has now shifted onto the Russian soil to the extent that it has gone up to Kremlin. So there is a shift in the uh, entire dynamics of the war. Now, what it leads us to could be mighty dangerous and rather of interesting. So that is where I leave it till we go and discuss further.
Let's let's put a pin on that for a little bit. So I'll open out the discussion with the US, which is very interesting. I mean, I sent you an article which was written in Politico, which talks about the Biden team, looking for alternatives. That one, and the second thing that came out is the NATO Supreme Commander, Europe. He gave a congressional hearing where he said that the Russian army has not been damaged as much as we think. They are rather still fully there and fully, as a matter of fact, strong. And he also hinted towards the factor of Russian undersea aggression. Now, this particular statement is completely the opposite from what Lloyd Austin, who's the defense secretary, gave into Congress about 2 weeks ago. Now, is there a difference between the politics of the war and the American army, who's now probably saying, yeah, it's thoda distance?
You see, well, I was always saying all the while that the Russia has not committed its forces to the extent that it should have. You see, again, at the cost of repeating, at the beginning of the war, they came in with great amount of force with a view just to enter Ukraine and suppress them and change of regime, and then that's it. When
Okay.
they realized it was not going to be so easy, they pulled out. So, A, for the Ukrainians to have considered that as a big, counteroffensive and, throwing the Russians back and things like that, that's not the correct thing. It's not the way you look at it. So the person in uniform in command today, right? He is I forget his name. He made it very clear that the Russian army had not been committed. Now he's a military man in uniform. He knows exactly as to how much uh, army he has, how much they've committed, how much it would mean. Uh, you know what is the residual combat power? In our military parlance, we would
Yeah.
calculate the residual combat power as to what is it existing. Now, this kind of residual combat power, I would say, in my opinion, Russia would still have about 70% of its residual combat power existing and at hand to commit subsequently. You know, he would have, I mean, who uses paramilitary forces, Wagner forces? So, what you got to see is a Russian mind. They know that they are dealing with an army which is at the moment firstly, A, it's not a major enemy, right? B, it is today consisting of a ragtag force. I would say ragtag, very highly motivated. When I say
mm,
ragtag, because not to degrade them or say anything against them, it's made up of so many different people, ill-trained troops, highly motivated, ill-trained troops, is what I want to say. So the Russians very well understand that, and they feel that instead of committing their own regular forces, they have put the Wagners against them, right? Okay, you are capable enough to deal with them. You go and deal with them. I'll do the bigger thing in life. So that is what they have done. So the American general, he obviously understands that. Now, when it comes to Lloyd Austin, uh, who has now the who was an ex military man, a general, but now he has the onerous duty of convincing the polity. He has to put up a front to say he has to garner the support of all the entire Congress
mm.
against this war. So where does the money come from? After all, it's the taxpayers' money that they were to pull out and give to Ukraine. So
Yeah,
until or unless a lot of senators are convinced, that's not going to happen. And the Americans, in any case, are like proven liars as far as building cases for wars is concerned. So Iraq is, we know that the
yeah,
weapons of mass
yeah, yeah,
destruction,
yeah.
etc. So they have proven to the world that they lied to themselves, they lied to their people, they've proven to themselves that in Vietnam they lied, etc. So they have to lie to the people to convince the people that we need to do this is a kind of a just war that we must partake in, or at least support. So again, one of those lies has been spoken, and there is obviously the military has got a very straightforward thought process, whereas
Mm.
the Secretary of Defense has to, convince the
Left, right,
rest of
center. Mm,
yeah.
mm.
So and today they are at crossroads. The problem is that today President Biden is in a bind. Biden is in a bind. You know, you twist these alphabets and you get it in binded,
We gotta bind it.
bind it. So, so he is in a bind there. Biden is in a bind there because why? For a simple reason that if this war does not succeed, this counteroffensive of the Ukrainians does not succeed after having provided billions of I don't know how many billion it goes to. I was today I did a little bit of search and I found how much of billions that they've given. The US since 2014 and till this figures are till February of 23, they've given 32.4 billion.
Whew.
Since Biden took over, it is 30.4 billion. And since February 22, it is 29.8 billion. Now we've added a couple of more
Wow.
billions. So that has been committed till date. There's another figure which is going around that says 46.6 billion. But the earlier figures that I quoted are from the Department of Defense website. So I would tend to go by that because that's an official website, and those are the figures which have been given on that.
And these
And
are these are apart from the black funds and
oh, we're not talking about that.
yeah,
That
that's
that
okay. Wow.
that will be into two. That will be into two of this amount, right? And as of today, as per their website, they've trained about 9,600 Ukrainian troops in operating about 15 different kinds of weapon systems and equipment. So when you look at all this, there's too much at stake
Mm.
for the resident. You got the elections around the corner next year, Feb 2024, and if the Ukrainian counteroffensive does not succeed, well, it's going to be very difficult for him to.
He's done.
Yeah, he's done. He's got to convince his people that how much of money that was taxpayers' money it's just gone in, and if it goes through, then he's on pig's back. So a lot of it is on political stake as far as he is concerned. Then at the same time, when you look at Europe, you've seen the kind of ripple effect which is taking place in Europe as far as the economy is concerned. What was supposed to have happened in Russia has actually happened in Europe instead. Uh, we've had five countries objecting to the trade, the wheat part of it, export of wheat and other agro products, and they're up in arms against the EU,
Ukraine.
and EU has kind of agreed that yes, we will have to go by what you're saying, and they've stopped the import of Ukrainian wheat. Also, the energy crisis which is taking place in Europe. So all this and the amount of money which has gone in, uh, there is a lot of stake for a lot of these people who are at the top. The German Chancellor, the French President, all these
Personal
people.
capital. Hmm.
Yes. So they'll have to pay a price. It's either way. It's a do or die situation for most of them. Now, let's see as to where it goes.
So,
So, in my opinion, there's a strong divide which is very visible between the Americans themselves. A lot of people today, whether in US or in Europe, are saying, "Thank you very much. Please end the war. No more." Europe, there are placards all over saying, "No more NATO." So NATO is also the very existence of NATO is also at stake. So when you look at all this, there are difference of opinions all over. And a very interesting statement made by someone was that Ukraine has never been their core interest area,
hmm.
right? Ukraine was never a part of the core interest. The core interest lies in the Indo-Pacific. It's China, and even this is, I think, President Obama's statement.
Obama,
It's not.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's his statement. It says it's not our core interest area. So when you look at all this, uh, there is division. There is division within the United States. There is division between the EU. There is division between the NATO. So I think it's rocking a lot of boats. And how many people are going to jump out of the boat with the tide? I don't know. Yeah.
Insane. Let's get to the counteroffensive. So, firstly, I'm no great shakes, but in military, this thing understanding, but common sense tells me I am a smaller country. I have lesser amount of equipment with me. I have been fighting for this much time. I have lost a lot of people already. Whatever equipment I am getting, I rather create a strong defensive line for myself, a maneuverable defensive line where I one conserve and am able to target something where I know I'm going to get a result. The whole idea of a counter offensive for me would be pointless because I'll have to go in with a lot of force, which will, I mean, higher casualties, higher amount of expenditure in terms of ammunition, and plus who holds the line behind me after that. So there's, for me, that's something which I have not been able to understood why a counter offensive in the first place, sir. And secondly, of course, now you have, I know you've got something, a bomb to drop on all of us, where a potential target of the counter offensive is something that you're thinking about, sir. So I'll let you take us forward in that, sir.
All right. Now, we started out with local counterattacks. As a defender, local counterattacks are enemy launches an attack, takes certain part. I'll immediately launch another counterattack and take it back. So that's a local counterattack. Then you have a deliberate counterattack. A deliberate counterattack is he's taken a piece of land or some area. I plan deliberately and I plan a proper attack with the requisite amount of air resources, with the requisite amount of artillery. I cater for all factors. I cater for my logistics, and I launch a deliberate counterattack on an area which is extremely important to me and evict the enemy from there.
Hmm.
I do it not immediately. I do it at the time and place of my own choosing.
Choosing. Hmm.
Right now, this is the counterattack part of it. Now comes a counteroffensive. So try and understand this. Offensive is a major force by a major force deep into enemy territory. What the Russians today have done, launched an offensive and captured
Areas in Ukraine. Perfect. Yes, sir.
areas in Ukraine, right? Now that they launched an offensive over a wide front, mark my words, over a wide front, and they kept fighting, 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 and they have reached a particular line. Some of it they have made into a defensive line after having captured an area, right? Fearing a deliberate counterattack or a counter-offensive in that particular site. Now, because Crimea is crucial to them, the Zaporozhye,
Well,
that area is crucial, so they have made that defensive line over there for how many 100 kilometers, uh, God knows. So they have done that, right? Bakhmut fight is still on, so there are no defensive positions as of now. But once Bakhmut is captured, the defensive position would ideally come ahead of Bakhmut
correct, sir.
or using the outer fringes of Bakhmut because these areas, urban areas, are easily defendable
Hmm.
because there's a lot of rubble and things like that. So you make use of all that, and then you can have a strong defensive line within this with the outer periphery of the outer. Instead of going out to an open area, you are now already in rubble. So that would get fortified, and that would become a defensive line. But when the defender, in this case, let's say it's offender was the guy who launched the offensive was Russia. The defenders are Ukrainians, right? Now the Ukrainians are talking about a counter-offensive.
So they're the offender, and Russians become the defender.
Yeah, no, it's a counter-offensive. You launched an offensive. Now I'm going to launch an offensive. Now I'm going to launch an offensive. Where should I launch an offensive? Should I launch an offensive where you're well prepared? Should I bang my head against well prepared defenses? Will go through? Should I bang my head and launch a deliberate counterattack and take back Bakhmut? What will accrue out of it? Will I be able to do it in a shorter time frame, on a faster time frame with less number of casualties or higher number of casualties?
Hmm.
Right? Which is the fertile land? The fertile land is in the
East.
in these
Yeah.
four oblasts which are there, Donetsk and downwards, right? Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye,
Zaporozhye.
and
Kherson.
Kherson. So these are the ones which are the most fertile areas, right? The entire mining, etc., everything is here. So do I want to bang my head and take this area back, or should I go to an area where my enemy, that is in this case Russia, is not expecting me? If Russia has brought the war into my territory, can I not think of taking the war into his territory? Now, when I am saying this, taking the war into Russian territory, I made a statement earlier. The preparations of taking the war into Russian territory or some part of it is already started. Hitting Moscow. If today two drones have gone in, if Bryansk airfield was attacked, incidentally, Bryansk airfield was attacked and a Tupolev 124 was also an old one, vintage, was also destroyed. Two trains have been destroyed. So the point I'm trying to make is that I would like to go in, if I were Ukraine, I would like to go in an area where the enemy does not have defenses, is not
Obviously,
prepared to receive me, is not prepared to receive me, and I can surprise him. So you tell me an area where I can surprise him. So to my common understanding, and if I'm a bold defender, if I have the entire support of NATO, 31 countries plus extra, I mean, there's a total of 54 countries which are backing uh, Ukraine. 31 NATO is one part, but other than that, there are many other countries which are also supporting, like Japan and all, providing equipment, providing money. So like this, there are 54 nations behind Ukraine. So I have a support of 54 countries. For me, it's a do and die situation. I might as well go and take some area, some Russian, territory. So if then the other factor is the river. River flows diagonally. If you
correct.
just if it cuts across diagonally, it starts from Kiev, and then it goes down right down and joins up with the sea. Now, when it is flowing diagonally, I would like to surprise the enemy. And from where can I surprise the enemy? I can surprise the enemy by already having crossed the river. If he has to come and attack down south, he
Hmm.
has to cross the river. He is vulnerable while crossing. His
Correct.
movements are watched. He is vulnerable while crossing. He will not be allowed to cross. He can have any amount of equipment. So, if I'm around Kiev, or if all the weapon equipment which is coming in from all over the world is landing up at Kiev, I would rather go into the border between Belarus and Russia, that is in head towards Bryansk, and
So,
thereby
me.
threaten Moscow.
So here I have a map for that, sir.
Yeah,
You're talking about.
I'm talking Bryansk. I'm talking now. How do I point it out for you?
Yeah, I'll help you out, guys. This is a very, very interesting perspective which has not been spoken about. Sir is talking about no offensive in the area of battle, which is in this entire red marked Ukraine, but actually taking the battle up. If you see where Belarus is, next to Belarus, there is a red mark. Below that, there's a city called Bryansk. Uh, this is basically going north east into Russia, and if you look right on top of the screen, you'll see Moscow. So, what Sir is saying, Ukraine would like to do is an exchange offer. Am I right, sir?
Absolutely. Now, the distances, just for everybody's perspective, just to get it on the right perspective, uh, let me just give you distances. Okay. Or anyway, yeah, the distance. Sorry, just a second.
This is quite the game if they're able to pull this off, sir.
Yeah, that's how counteroffensives are launched.
Yeah.
Offensives are not launched banging your head against something. Those are counter attacks. When you launch a counter offensive, you launch it in an area of your own choosing, surprising the enemy in an area where he is weak, where he is not expecting me, where it is easy for me to, capture territory. That's what a military mind, a person with a military mind would do. When I'm in a do or die situation, I'm not worried. As it is, I'm going to get annihilated.
So that's the direction you're talking about.
I'm talking about this direction, and you know where it's leading?
uh,
You know where it's leading? I hope that some Russian is listening to me, and I hope the Ukrainians. I mean,
don't do
I don't
this.
know. I'm a neutral mind,
I
but this
hope
is
they
what
don't
I
do
would do.
this,
This is what I would do. Yes, I know that I would invite a very strong reaction.
sir.
I know I'm going to invite a terrible reaction from the Russians.
But I'm as it is dying. What difference it
As
make
it
to
is,
me?
I'm dying. It's a do or die. If I have captured a couple of hundreds, 1,000 square kilometers, and trust me, if I succeed, if the Ukrainians succeed in capturing about, say, couple of thousand square kilometers by a surprise counteroffensive where they're not expecting, and mind you, they've already infiltrated pro-Ukrainian, elements in that area who are there to support them. They will bring down all the rails, all the stuff which is going to be coming by railroad. They're going to be ambushing them. They're going to be blowing them up. They're going to be supporting this war. Otherwise, why would it happen there? Simple question I want to ask. Why would they attempt to take on, uh, have a drone attack on the airfield? That red dot that you see is an airfield of that is Bryansk. Why would they launch a drone attack? Now these are the drones have been launched to check the veracity, check the vulnerability of the Russians.
Air defenses.
Yes. So the drones have gone, they've been successful.
How many have gone? There's that we don't know, but they've reached.
Yeah, they've reached.
No question. No question, sir.
So you tell me, why would they be in this particular direction? Why not elsewhere?
Belarus is
So,
dangerous.
so this is how battles, wars are fought. This is how counteroffensive is done. This is a flank which at the moment is vulnerable as far as the Russians are concerned. Their entire forces are, or their attention of the world is at around so-called Bakhmut and Crimea. Once uh, you know okay, make this arrow straight and see that bulge which is there. There is a bulge.
Hmm.
There is
Between the
a bulge.
Belarus border and
Yes,
between
there is a
Belarus
bulge.
and yeah, yeah.
Now, if I cut this area, if I straighten this arrow and I cut this and make it a border, make the border straight and
Kinsky.
capture this particular portion.
Small
Now
little
I have
wedge, but you still have a wedge of Mother Russia.
no, you've captured Russia, you've cut down, you've taken away a chunk of Russia, right, of Russian territory. And the moment this happens, the war is, the world is going to start crying. Russia is going to launch a nuclear attack, ceasefire. Now the ceasefire takes place. Now it's a simple. You give back Crimea to me. I give back this to you. How do you like it?
The war won't stop, sir.
Oh, the world will. Then the world will come in. China will say no, 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 no nuclear, no thing, no escalation. Russia will cry out, and there will be a ceasefire which will take place. Zelensky will say, yeah, yeah, I'm ready for a ceasefire, and he'll have a bargaining. He'll have
Yeah.
adequate amount of territory. and he would have kind of rubbed the nose of the Russians on the ground. These are counteroffensives. Now, if there was, if you would see the river line now, he's already from Kiev. It's easy for him to have already been on the eastern side. He doesn't have to cross the river.
Here you can see that a little better, sir.
Yeah, so he would have
Hmm.
crossed the river. So
He's
surprise,
already across the river.
yeah, he's already across the river. And as I was mentioning, there is this place, this is Sumi that you see onto the right, on the border.
On the border, bang on the border of Russia.
Yeah, you see a place called Sumi Oblast.
Here you'll be able to see it better right here, guys. Where this yellow dot is there, where the battle, this thing is, the battlefront is there, right? It's just above that. It's called Sumy. In Russian you can find a CY, so I'm
Yeah.
sure you'll be able to locate.
So when you see Sumi, there's another place actually not marked here. This is called the Cherniv
Chernihiv.
Oblast.
Huh.
Where
Hmm.
your arrow is going through is the Cherniv Oblast. Now, from this place called Cherniv to Bryansk, I'm talking about the place Cherniv to Bryansk. The distance is 358 kilometers. So, from the border, Bryansk should be around 200 kilometers by road. Crow
Hmm.
fly, it would be much less, so 100 plus. So, imagine if the war had to break it, the counteroffensive were to be launched, it would be 100 kilometers by air and about 200 kilometers by road. And trust me, this area is not the boggy area. The boggy area is down south. So the tanks, not being able to move, etc., all that kahani, all that story, don't want to work here. It is not applicable here. So, uh,
Mind blowing. Mind boggling.
so, so this is the this is the shortest way to Moscow.
I mean, he doesn't need to go to Moscow, but
Yeah, that we when in the military parlance, whenever you make an objective, you say capture area Bryansk with a view to threaten Moscow. That would be the aim of my counteroffensive. If I were to launch it, I would say my so and so troops, whichever, whatever division, corps, whatever it is, or the Ukrainian army will launch a counteroffensive to capture area Bryansk with a view to threaten Moscow. That would be my statement. You can invite any reaction. You invite a reaction, yes, I'm ready to die. As it is, I'm ready to die. But what have I done? I've become a hero. I've captured Russian territory. I have a bargaining tool. I can bargain. You get out, I get out. You don't get out, I don't get out. Either it's finders keepers or it's a trade-off. So
what will be the Russian reaction to something like that, sir? They've got troops in Belarus.
yeah,
Of course, they're going to have some crack troops around Moscow and stuff like that. So
no, no,
there's that.
Moscow is, we're not talking Moscow. Moscow is too far.
Too far away, but I'm just saying, if let's say he does this into
Yeah, yeah, there'll be a strong reaction. But I'm telling you, before the reaction contacts, there'll be a ceasefire. It'll be orchestrated ceasefire. The whole world is,
but then
Russia will.
that's the whole point. So when you come to a point like that, I mean, then that fire might just reduce right now, but that fire is still going to be there. One fine day again, it'll ignite, and again something will happen.
No, that is the Russian way, and that is how it is. Otherwise, had it not happened, NATO wouldn't have expanded. NATO wouldn't have expanded. This war wouldn't have taken place. Georgia would not have taken place. we won't have had the this Trinestra and all these areas which are there, which have been taken
Amazing.
by
I must
Russia.
say, so this is an eye opener. I I keep I keep a track of Ukraine quite closely. I haven't heard one person talking about this thing, and these are some of pro-Russia guys who are, you know, looking at it very carefully. If the Ukrainians do pull this off, I mean, as much as I don't like them, one will have to give it to them.
No, I'm just looking at it from a military point of view, and
Yeah,
I'm talking. I'm
I'm saying this for the first time, especially with the reaction of Ukraine coming in with these
and and
cartoons
I'm
and this and that. So probably the
and
first time I'm openly saying it, I don't like them. But yeah, it's a very objective perspective, sir.
and when they blew up this or that whatever the train and that goddess Kali, that photograph came about, it what was it trying to signify? Is signifying doom for the Russians. So that now it's a what do you call
Time for blood.
Ma Kali is now angry and is going to take revenge. So
उड़ा दिया सर आपने तो. I don't know any of us audience. I think I didn't expect this going inside to this episode. This is a absolutely a fantastic analysis of what may just happen. If
I don't know
we
whether
go
it'll
to
happen or not, but this is what
the possibility, yes. Mm.
if I were leading the Ukrainian army, I would do this. If I had the support of 54 countries, if I had so much of wherewithal freshly being put in, if I had less troops and I would aim to achieve maximum, I would do this. I would go into an area where no river crossing is involved, where the enemy is not uh, dug down, not prepared, uh, in which I threaten the maximum, the heart of my enemy. This is the shortest way in, and the ground is in favorable conditions.
And negotiation on Crimea is
And then there are subsequent negotiations possible.
possible. Let's get into some questions, sir. Let's see what the audience has to, first of all, think about what sir said as far as the offensive possibility is concerned, and of course, the other things that we've discussed. For that, guys, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. Share it with your friends. That's most important thing. People with like-minded approaches and like-minded yearns for knowledge can always come down to Dev Talks. You can support the Dev Talks efforts with a QR code, become a member, or send us a super sticker or super chat, which is what Ishan has done. Thanks, Ishan, for your contribution. He says, Jayan, sir, do people realize? Do people realize this is exactly how the US would have responded to USSR and Cuba in the 60s if the Russians refused to remove their missiles, although the Americans might have used a lot more brute force?
Yeah, self-explanatory. Absolutely.
Monroe Doctrine in place, huh?
Yeah. So, the response has to be a very thought of response. It cannot be just banging your head against a wall.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't go in down south and think I would be crazy to think that I can go through all the obstacles and then try and capture Crimea or get the land bridge. All right, even if I get the land bridge, so what? Until unless I capture the entire of Crimea. And trust me, the this is what the Russians should be wary of. What I've just said.
Mhm.
At the same time, I'm sure Russians have got better plans. I think I'll reserve those plans for the next one. I have some interesting plans that they would like to execute, and if they have to achieve their aims,
Mhm.
oh, I mean, this is a major possibility that I have just talked about, because that is how the military mind should ideally be thinking at the
If
highest
this
level.
if this happens, what are the Russian options and stuff like that? As I said, we'll take it up in the next one. It's going to be interesting to see what the Russians' options are, considering this or without that. What are the
Yeah,
options? We'll
yeah,
probably
sure.
look at it. So fantastic. Ishan, once again, thank you. Another question: do you believe that the Ukrainians have made a big mistake by this attack on Kremlin? Are they capable of withstanding the Russians if they decide to go all out now?
The Ukrainians at the moment remain vulnerable. There's no doubt about it, and it is, as I said, you call it a mistake, or you call it a well thought of probing action. As I was talking, they have tried to probe as to how, let's reverse the situation.
Hmm.
When the Russians launched those 18 missiles on Kiev on the 29th or 30th, right? 15 of them got destroyed by the Patriot
Yeah.
air defense systems, right? So they are
Then the next
protecting
day
the
they got
capital.
drones. Mm.
They are protecting that capital. Now, Russia never in their own dreams, wild dreams, I would have thought that drones would come up right up to Moscow. And as I said, the crow fly distance would be much less. The road distance from Kiev to Moscow is 856 kilometers. Crow fly will be around 600 kilometers.
Gee.
And a drone traveling 600 kilometers, no big deal, taking off from Kiev. So that has been tested. Now, I'm sure the Russians today, the after effect of all this would be to strengthen their air defense around Moscow and other big cities as well. So it's a warning for the Russians. How they react, let us see in the next couple of days. Uh,
Absolutely.
I think it's not a mistake, but a deliberate act on the part of the Ukrainians to do so.
Yeah, probing attacks are pretty well established
Yeah,
way
and to
of.
say that it's an assassination attempt on Putin and all,
That's
that's
just
all.
fun, sir. That's
That
just
that
fun.
that's for media and that's for everybody's to add a little,
A small little drones are
flavor.
what lit funny.
Yeah.
Naveen, thanks so much for your contribution. Has the good general sir foiled some Ukraine NATO plans? First the leaks, now this.
If I have, Naveen, thank you very much for your comment. Well, I'm a neutral guy. I couldn't care a damn about the NATO and I couldn't care a damn about the Russians as far as this is concerned. Uh, I may have just done what you have written. I may have just done that. I hope they don't get after my backside.
So there's enough leaks in the neighborhood in terms of USA. They need to find a way to plug that nonsense. By the way, there's a news that came out that this guy has been putting out documents since February 2022.
Yeah, yeah, February. That's what.
I mean, l- last year, sir.
Yeah, yeah. He enjoyed doing it.
लगा हुआ था. And can you imagine? I mean, it's just
You
amazing.
know, Naveen, the only comment I would like to make is this is how the Indian Army thinks, and this is what we would do if we were in a situation like this.
Hello, China, listening?
No, that's what a counter-offensive is. Offensive,
Yes.
counter-offensive.
Amay says, ask, do you think neocons in DC who want war to continue are pushing Russia to escalate the conflict so high that even people who are opposing them can't do anything but support the war?
Quite true, I mean, it's what you just said is right. Uh, it's in their interest as far as the defense industry, defense production, defense procurement, all that is concerned. This is a huge cartel which operates in the United States. These are the guys who love wars, uh, who love to create wars, and because they are the ones who supply tons and tons of money to these politicians. They're the ones who do the funding part of it. These senators and the governors and all these guys, they're forced to listen to them and support wars. So, as far as they are concerned, that's why they keep fingering Russia to do more and more, and so that the war is prolonged. And it's all a game about money. I mean, Zelensky's made tons and tons of money. There is infighting amongst the, uh, senior officers, senior hierarchy of Ukraine to grab a greater pie, and CIA is quite worried as far as the embezzlements of money by Ukrainians are concerned. So it's the same story in the United States. It's all about money. So they want the war to prolong so that more money can be made. Lives don't matter to them.
What are the chances of it being a false flag operation by Russia itself, the drone?
No, they would not do that.
Not on your own presidential palace.
I don't buy this. It's not a false flag thing. By us, having just one drone being launched by themselves. No, no, no. Russians are
Russia
far.
Russia looks so weak after the drone attacks.
No, they're not weak. I wouldn't say they are weak. It's just that they found that they were vulnerable. Uh, what is showing is that they didn't expect it to happen,
Hmm.
and they are being taken by surprise. And I kind of at times do get amazed at the Russian generals for not being so well prepared. But then it's generally so, because until and unless you're in the middle of war and war has not spilled into your territory, you tend to be lax. And it has proven to them that they need to wake up, pull up their socks, and get a little more serious about their own defenses. At the moment, they're only worried about defending Crimea and the territory which they've captured. So the point that I've just made today is that Russia needs to wake up. They may find that the battle is now going to be brought into their soil, and the moment that happens, trust me, there's deep trouble.
Jack, thanks for this question. But as we discuss this, we will take up in the next session. What are the how long will the escalation last, and you know what will be the Russian reaction? So I'll be sure to take this up in the next session as a complete subject itself. So let's any short comment, or should we just leave it, sir?
No, it's a direct attack on Putin, no doubt about it. But it also, if I were Putin, I would be infuriated. I would be furious, not at the Ukrainians, but my own people. So there are a lot of amends which have to the Russians have to wake up, as I just said, and how they react to this. Firstly, the reaction within, and second is a reaction account. After all, if you launch 18 missiles on Kiev, once or two drones on Moscow are not a big deal.
Correct, sir.
So it just shows that they are vulnerable as of today, and the war can spill over into their territory. So let's see the reaction.
This is an interesting question from Partha. He says, given the expansion of BRICS, will Mr. Putin deal a soft but a deadly blow to the US or USD, or will he be needed to take a tough stand on the battlefield to show his people he held his ground?
I think he would do both.
He can do both. Let's face
Yeah,
that. I mean,
I mean, he's doing both, or he will do both. I would just put it this way: battlefield and as far as the USD is concerned, these I would put them as two separate things. While Ukraine may have triggered the uh, you know, death, slow death of the dollar. It's just a trigger, the Ukraine war. But the battlefield is a different arena, I would put it this way. And as far as President Putin is concerned, he, along with President Xi of China, as also the other BRIC nations, the USD is going to, as it is, we know it's losing value. I, I would say Ukraine is a trigger, but both of them, it's not either or situation. It's not an either or situation. It's a both these things will happen, and he will take a tough stand as far as the battle is concerned, and he will also be a party to the de-dollarization issue as far as BRICS is, along with the BRIC nations. And BRICS is growing by the
Mhm.
day, and we will. You just when 60% of the, or I would say 70% of the world unites together against another currency, you
You're
dollar is
done.
going nowhere. Yeah.
You're done.
Yes.
Sharda asks, Sir, what is the suicide possibility and the risk worth taking as against surrendering? I think she's specifically asking about Zelensky or Ukraine. I mean,
Yeah. Soldiers don't commit suicide. Soldiers don't surrender. Soldiers die fighting, firstly. Yes, you may have been put to a situation where you, uh, you need not be there.
hmm,
Let's say Bakhmut also at the moment, and all these young boys who are fighting there, hats off to them. They're very good, very courageous, everything. But most of them, when you're in a battlefield, when you are being attacked, when you are used to firing and killing, or you could die yourself, you're prepared to die. Trust me, you don't worry about your family and things like that, and you don't feel like committing suicide. You fight, and the emotions are well charged up. We soldiers have a different mental makeup. So suicide, that doesn't come in. The thought doesn't come in a soldier. Now, uh, you die fighting, or if the situation so demands, you surrender. But definitely not a suicide. A soldier won't do it. I would just put it that way. Suicide doesn't come to our mind. I mean, you surrender, you know you're going to die. As it is, you signed up for death to die for your nation. If you ask me, what did I say? The oath that we take on commissioning is that at the end, we are prepared to give our life for the nation, whether at land or sea or in the air, for our nation. So we have a kasam parade. In that
hmm,
kasam is what we take, and that is foremost in our mind. For a soldier, death is the ultimate.
yes, sir. So why are Russia not eliminating Zelensky? What happens if they do that? He becomes a martyr.
It's better to have a clown leading a pack of wolves.
Anyways, I could have put it like that, but yeah, absolutely.
It's better to have somebody who has no clue what's happening.
Yeah.
So there's no point killing him. He's doing adequate harm as it is. So he's not something worth knocking off. It's better to have him around so that there is a little bit of humor in the war. Uh, so he's inconsequential, and he's creating more chaos. And I would put it this way: it will be their own people. Somebody from within NATO or one of the NATO countries will have him knocked off, but definitely not the Russians. It's in Russia's interest to have him alive. and leading his country stupidly.
Absolutely. I mean, if they wanted to knock him off, I think they would have knocked him off by now. There was not a very
Yeah,
this.
nobody is going to knock him off.
This is a butter chicken and naan in asking a question.
No, good, yeah, good. I mean, interesting
Possibility
fellow,
of
whosoever you are.
possibility of sparks of Iran versus Israel clashing during this war, sliding the world into World War III. Yikes!
Yeah, we can complicate issues, not any. I mean, there, no, that's Iran, Israel. There is, Taiwan, China. There is India, China. There is so many possibilities of so many wars taking place and sparking off, and hence the World War Three. We've already seen what's happening in Sudan. Sudan is also a play between the Americans and the Russians. So all that. Uh, so these are dynamics which are taking place, and Iran-Israel clash along with this war. Yeah, if it happens, it happens.
Hmm.
But it's a different arena altogether.
There's not much you'll be able to do about it.
Yes, but as of now, don't see such kind of a situation arising, and that is how Iran, Saudi Arabia, all these things are being. China's playing the peace broker, and let's see what happens. But Israel, Palestine, also they want to kind of bring in peace. So the West, the I would just put it, the Middle East at the moment uh, is all hemmed in, right? We would rather have them not getting into a situation. Well, even chances are low as of today, and I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah.
And we'll take a last one, sir. It says, "What do you see is the possibility of a mutiny against Zelensky from the army because of his stressful battles?"
Mutiny, no, not happening. I think the Ukrainians are uh, far too proud, uh, a
They
nation as
got the
far as.
SBU to shoot them down as well. So
No, no, they won't do that. A mutiny and against Zelensky until unless some they can always be somebody who is like anti-Zelensky, goes close to him and knocks him off. But I don't see a mutiny taking place. I
last
if it had to happen, it would have happened by now.
happened
Whatever.
already by Bakhmut. I thought something should have happened, but now I don't think so anymore. So lastly, this counter-offensive. I mean, what do you think is going to be the proportion of mercenaries in it, sir?
No, zero.
Is going to be pure
I think
Ukrainians?
you're talking about the from the sorry
Ukrainian,
mercenaries. Yeah, I would say they are already there. When you're looking at these mercenary element as far as the Western mercenaries are concerned, this element would be already there inside Russian soil. Uh, they are the ones who will be the you see what happens, the special force X, the retired special force people, veterans, would have already been employed by the Ukrainians or even by NATO and put into Russian soil to carry out these acts of sabotage. Because at the end of it all, you need trained people there across in Russian soil. They are the ones who will direct fire. They are the ones who will give the intelligence. So all these people would already in the area where the counteroffensive has to go in. Uh, Trust me, these guys would already be there because they
I
are
must say,
trained.
sir, for the with the risk of sounding repetitive, this was a fantastic theory. Honestly, leaving alone the Russia-Ukraine thing separate, but just understanding the military mindset of looking for a completely whacked out different solution, because that's what at the end of it wins battles, if I may. I mean, that's something that has been going through my head, that you want to win, then you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah,
This
Adi, that's where that's the art of war, and that's where generalship comes in. You know, you can't. The world is not talking like this, and that's what we think like, and that's what we would do if we were to do it. So what is a superior enemy? I have the backing of 54 countries, 31 NATO, and plus all. I have uh, equipment. I've been recently trained. I have motivated troops. I will capture as much. I will take the war into his territory. I will capture maximum territory. Let him let him react, and then trust me, this would all be thought of already as to when the ceasefire has to be brought, and this would have been war gamed. All these things are not. Uh, they're all war gamed. All these situations. This situation has been there for a very long time. I mean, it
Hmm.
is not something. This counteroffensive has been talked about for a very long time. The situation is the same for a very long time. So, a lot of military minds would have got together, war gamed pros and cons uh, to a great extent, and nobody, you know, carries out a counteroffensive into an area by telling that I'm going to come here. Nobody's going to do that. So that's my take on it, and I would have done it that way if I had to do it. And trust me, give a jolt to the enemy if I have to do it.
There are few people who said, "So hats off," and this is how the Indian Army trains up to tripled up rides today. So just also tells us, and that's a clear compliment at your answer. That also tells us the virality of thought that the army in our country, the armed forces in our country, imbibes into our leadership and imbibes into our soldiers. It's great to see something like that. And I think Naveen was also saying, Shada said this. Glad I could join for after a long while. What a topic to come back to. Hats off. And if this is what our Indian Army trains up to, tripled up right, sir.
Thank you, Shada. Thank you for your kind words.
And Naveen, thanks so much. He says, I'll second Adi's point about a military mind. Great to learn about a live war and see how an Indian general thinks. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you very much. Yeah, we do think like that. We train to do that, and we consider all possibilities before we go
Absolutely.
in.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm going to say this right now. Next week is going to be on what the options that the Russians will have. What are the Russians planning at doing? Because they've also collected a huge, huge force. Some people talk about 700,000 soldiers in and around Ukraine at the moment. What are they thinking? We've talked about the Ukrainians. Next week, let's see what they're trying to do.
So
Sir,
if I were a Russian general with 700,000 troops,
what
what
would you
would be
do?
my what would you do? If you can make a wild guess, great.
Let's see, guys. So, sir has given us some homework. Let's see. So, I'll launch the episode 2 days before when it's going to happen. Please write in your comments and let's see what you guys come up with. Till then, sir, thank you so much once again. It's always a pleasure learning from you and talking to you. Jai Hind, sir.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. All the best. Take care.